The desert stretched wide, endless, and cruel. Heat waves shimmered in the air, making the ground look like a boiling sea. The sky burned with a pale orange glow, and the sun showed no mercy. In the middle of this wasteland, a figure stumbled forward. Her hands were tied with rough chains. Her ankles were bound by iron cuffs. Every step cut into her skin. She was young, though the dust and blood on her face made her look older. Her hair clung to her forehead, soaked in sweat. Her lips were dry, cracked from thirst. She tried to swallow, but her throat was empty. Only pain remained. Behind her, the raiders laughed. Their voices echoed in the dry air, sharp and cruel. They dragged her like a trophy, pulling her forward with a long iron rope. To them, she was not a person. She was a prize, a captive to sell or trade. Her screams meant nothing. Her tears were a game. The desert floor burned her bare feet. Every stone cut into her skin. She winced but did not fall. Falling meant punishment. Falling meant the whip. Her back still carried the memory of it, the sting of leather, the heat of fire, the sound of their mocking laughter. She kept moving. Step after step. Hour after hour. Her vision blurred. Her legs trembled. She no longer knew how many days had passed. Only pain told her that time was still alive. Once she had been free. She remembered her home, the green valleys, and the rivers that sang with life. She remembered her people, their songs, their voices filled with hope. Now those memories felt far away, like fading stars. The raiders spoke among themselves. They joked about how much her life was worth. They spoke of the city markets where she would be sold. They spoke of breaking her spirit until she begged to obey. She listened, but she did not answer. Her silence was her last weapon. She refused to give them her voice. Her knees weakened. She stumbled forward, catching herself before she fell. The chains rattled. The raiders pulled harder, making her choke as the iron rope cut into her wrists. She wanted to scream, but she did not. She wanted to collapse, but she would not. Somewhere inside her, a small fire remained. It whispered that she could endure, that she could survive. The sun began to set. The desert turned from gold to crimson, then slowly into shadows. Cold wind replaced burning heat. Yet the pain did not leave her. Her wounds burned. Her body ached. Her mind swam in darkness. The raiders finally stopped. They set up a rough camp, nothing more than fire and stone. They tied her to a pole, as if she were no different from an animal. She sat on the hard ground, too tired to resist. Her arms ached. Her legs throbbed. Her body screamed for rest, but fear kept her awake. The fire crackled. The raiders laughed louder, drinking from stolen flasks. Their shadows stretched across the sand, long and monstrous. They sang songs of conquest. Every word was sharp, cruel, filled with arrogance. She looked up at the stars. They blinked faintly through the desert sky. Once, those stars had given her hope. Tonight, they looked cold and distant, as if they too had abandoned her. Her heart grew heavy. She felt small, powerless, and forgotten. She wondered if her people even knew where she was. She wondered if they still prayed for her, or if they had already mourned her death. The chains cut into her wrists. She tried to pull free, but her strength was gone. The iron held tight. The fire glowed against her skin, and she felt the eyes of her captors watching her. She looked away, refusing to give them the satisfaction of her fear. The night grew colder. The desert wind howled like a beast. She shivered, pulling her knees close to her chest. Her body shook with hunger, thirst, and exhaustion. Still, she did not cry. She refused to let her tears fall where the raiders could see. She closed her eyes and whispered a silent promise. If she survived, she would never forget this night. If she lived, she would rise again. If fate allowed, she would make them pay. The raiders laughed in the distance. Their fire burned bright, but she sat in the shadows. Alone. Bound. Dragged through pain and humiliation. Her head lowered. Her breath slowed. Sleep tried to pull her into its arms, but fear fought to keep her awake. Then, faintly, she felt something strange. A presence. A gaze. Not from the raiders. Not from the stars. Something else. Something unseen. She opened her eyes and looked toward the horizon. In the distance, the cliffs stood tall, black against the night. She saw nothing, yet she felt it. Someone was there. Watching. The raiders laughed louder, unaware. She tightened her grip on her knees. Hope was dangerous, but for the first time in days, she felt it flicker. She did not know that far above, hidden in the shadows, a human soldier watched her suffering. His eyes followed her chains. His heart burned with silent rage. The raiders thought the desert belonged to them. They were wrong. The desert had a new shadow. And that shadow was human. The sun rose again, cruel and unforgiving. Its light spread across the desert, painting the sky in red and gold. Heat pressed down on the sand until it felt like fire beneath bare feet. The captive woman stirred as the raiders pulled her chains, forcing her to stand. Her body resisted, heavy with exhaustion, but the iron rope dragged her forward. Her throat burned with thirst. Her lips bled from cracks. Her eyes stung from the dry wind, yet she kept moving. Step by step, she followed the pull of the chain. She was no longer walking for herself. She was walking because they forced her. Her will was strong, but her strength was fading. The raiders moved with cruel joy. They carried stolen weapons, drank stolen water, and sang their ugly songs. They spoke to each other with laughter that cut like blades. Every sound reminded her that she was nothing more than a prisoner in their eyes. She looked down at her wrists. The skin was raw and broken from the chains. Blood marked the iron. Every step sent a sharp pain through her arms, but she clenched her fists and kept walking. To fall was to suffer worse. The desert stretched endlessly. Hills of sand rose and fell, mocking her with false promises of rest. She lifted her head and saw no end to the march. Only more heat. Only more chains. Her mind drifted back to the life she once knew. She remembered her family, their laughter around the fire. She remembered her mother's voice, soft like music. She remembered running through green fields, chasing light with joy. That world felt like a dream now, fading with every step. One of the raiders noticed her slowing pace. He yanked the chain hard, pulling her forward until she fell to her knees. The others laughed. Dust filled her mouth, bitter and dry. She coughed but did not beg. She rose again, her legs trembling but steady. The raiders whispered among themselves. They spoke of how much she would be worth in the city. They compared her to animals, placing a price on her freedom. She listened, but her heart hardened. Their words were chains too, but she would not let them break her spirit. Hours passed. The sun climbed higher. Her vision blurred. The sound of chains echoed in her head like drums of war. She felt as if the desert itself wanted to swallow her. Her steps slowed again. She stumbled, nearly falling. A raider raised his whip. She braced herself, ready for the sting. But before it came, she caught sight of something far away. For a moment she thought her mind was playing tricks. On the cliffs above, a dark figure moved. Her breath caught. The raider's whip struck her back, sharp and burning. Pain exploded through her body, yet her mind clung to what she had seen. She blinked through tears. The figure was gone, but the memory of it remained. Was it real? Or was she seeing shadows born of exhaustion? She did not know. Yet a strange warmth stirred in her chest, a tiny spark of hope. The march continued. Day turned slowly into night. The raiders made camp again. She was tied to the same iron pole, her body sinking to the ground. Her legs refused to rise. She sat in silence, her heart racing with thoughts of the shadows she had seen. The fire burned bright. The raiders laughed, eating and drinking. She sat apart from them, her chains heavy against her skin. She raised her head and looked toward the cliffs again. Nothing moved. No shadow appeared. Still, she could not shake the feeling that she was not alone. Someone had seen her. Someone had followed. Sleep tried to take her, but her heart fought against it. She remembered the figure, dark against the horizon. She remembered the way her spirit lifted, if only for a moment. The night was cold, and the wind cut through her skin. Yet she whispered to herself, a promise she dared not share. She whispered that her suffering had been seen. She whispered that her chains would not last forever. The raiders believed they had broken her. They were wrong. She still carried a spark within her. A spark that had been reignited by the silent watcher. Far above, hidden by shadows, the human soldier remained. His eyes never left her. He saw her fall. He saw her rise again. He saw her pain, and his fury grew. The desert did not belong to the raiders. The desert now belonged to the human who had chosen to watch. And soon to strike. The woman closed her eyes, holding on to that faint hope. She did not know who watched her. She did not know what would come. But for the first time in many days, her heart whispered something new. She whispered it into the cold night. Someone will come. And the desert kept the secret, waiting for the storm that was rising. The desert was quiet, but it was not empty. High on the cliffs, hidden in the dark, a man watched. His eyes followed the raiders below, sharp and steady like the eyes of a hunter. He did not move. He did not speak. He was a shadow among the rocks, and no one knew he was there. He had tracked the raiders for 3 days. He had seen the woman dragged through the burning heat, bound in chains, treated like prey. He had seen her stumble, rise, and stumble again. He had seen the whip break her skin and the fire steal her strength. Yet he had also seen something else. He had seen her spirit refuse to die. The human soldier clenched his jaw. His armor was scratched and scarred from past battles. His weapon rested at his side ready. His face carried the story of war, but his eyes burned with something deeper. Anger. Rage. A fury that grew stronger each time he heard the raiders laugh. The desert wind brushed against him, carrying the sound of chains, the sound of cruelty. He breathed slowly, his chest rising and falling like a silent storm. He waited, because waiting was his strength. But every heartbeat made the fire inside him burn hotter. Below, the woman sat tied to the pole. The flames of the raiders' campfire lit her face. She looked broken, yet her eyes searched the darkness, as if she could feel him. He saw the spark in her gaze. Even chained, even beaten, she still hoped. That hope was enough. The raiders drank and laughed around the fire. They believed they owned the desert. They believed no one would challenge them. They were wrong. The human had walked through worlds filled with danger, and he had faced enemies far greater than them. Yet what drove him now was not glory, nor duty. It was something stronger. It was the sight of her suffering. He whispered to himself, so softly the desert could barely hear. Not tonight. The stars watched in silence as the soldier adjusted his weapon. His hands were steady, his mind sharp. He studied the camp, every guard, every movement. He marked the patterns of their watch, the way they held their blades, the places where shadows lay deep. He could strike now, end them quickly. But he waited. He needed the moment to be right. He needed the strike to be clean, sharp, and final. These raiders would not get the chance to rise again. The woman shifted, her chains rattling softly. She lifted her head and looked once more toward the cliffs. He froze, though she could not see him. Still, he felt the weight of her gaze as if she knew. As if she believed someone was there. For the first time in days her lips moved. He could not hear her words, but he saw them. She whispered to the night. He knew what it meant. She was not asking for mercy. She was calling for hope. His heart tightened. He had walked across battlefields without fear. He had stood against armies without hesitation. Yet here, watching her, he felt something he had not felt in years. The need to protect. The need to save. The raiders laughed louder, drunk with arrogance. One of them threw a bone into the sand, another lifted a stolen flask high. They believed the desert belonged to them. They did not see the shadow above. The human soldier's hand closed around his weapon. He exhaled slowly, steadying his breath. His eyes narrowed. The moment was close. But still, he waited. The woman's suffering would end, but it would end with precision. He would not rush. He would not fail. The desert wind grew stronger. The fire in the raiders' camp flickered. The woman closed her eyes, leaning against the pole, her body trembling with exhaustion. He knew she was near the edge. Time was running thin. He whispered again, a promise carried only by the night. "You are not alone." The stars seemed to burn brighter above. The desert held its breath. The raiders laughed on, unaware that their time was ending. The soldier remained still, a shadow on the cliffs, silent as stone. But inside, the storm was ready. His fury was waiting. The raiders had dragged her across the desert for days. They believed no one would come for her. They believed she was theirs to break. They were wrong. The desert belonged to silence tonight, and silence carried a human name. Night wrapped the desert in silence. The wind carried the sound of the raiders' drunken laughter across the sand. Their fire burned high, sparks dancing into the sky. Shadows twisted around them, careless and loud. They believed the darkness made them safe. They did not know that death was watching. High above, the human soldier moved. He had waited long enough. His patience was sharp, but his fury was sharper. Tonight the raiders would pay. He slid down the rocks with the silence of a predator, every step measured, every movement hidden by the wind. The woman sat tied to the pole. Her head hung low, her body heavy with exhaustion. She thought sleep would take her at last, yet she forced her eyes open. Something inside told her this night was different. Something was coming. The soldier reached the edge of the camp. He crouched in the shadows, watching. He counted each raider, the weapons they carried, the way they staggered with drink. He marked their weakness. His hand tightened around his blade. A guard stood near the fire, half awake, his grip on his spear loose. He turned his head just once, long enough for the soldier to move. The human slipped from the dark and struck. A single blow, fast and silent. The guard collapsed without a sound. The fire cracked, but no one noticed. The woman heard a faint thud. Her eyes flickered toward the sound, but the raiders only laughed louder, distracted by their own noise. She looked back at the shadows, her heart racing. Something was there. She could feel it. Another raider wandered from the fire, stumbling into the dark to relieve himself. He never returned. The human's hands moved with deadly speed. A flash of steel, a muffled cry, then silence. The desert swallowed the sound. The soldier's face stayed cold, but inside his fury burned. Each strike was for the days he had watched her suffer. Each strike was for the chains that cut her skin. Each strike was for the cruel laughter that had filled the desert air. One by one, the raiders fell. The fire flickered, throwing wild shadows, yet none of them noticed. Their laughter masked the deaths around them. The camp was turning into a graveyard, and they did not even know it. At last, a raider near the woman looked up. His eyes narrowed. He thought he had heard something in the dark. He stepped away from the fire, lifting his blade. His voice called out, but before he could finish, the human's hand closed over his mouth. The blade struck fast. His body fell at her feet. The woman gasped softly, her eyes wide. She looked into the darkness, and saw him for the first time. A man, tall and scarred, his armor broken from battles unknown. His eyes glowed with fire, his breath steady as stone. She froze, unsure if he was savior or executioner. But then he moved to her chains. His hands gripped the iron. With a force that shocked her, he pulled. The chains snapped, shattering against the pole. She stared, too stunned to speak. Her wrists were free for the first time in days. He did not speak. He only nodded, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment, the world was still. She felt something she had not felt in so long. Safety. But the silence broke. One of the raiders noticed the missing guard. His drunken laugh turned into a scream. He raised his weapon and shouted. The camp exploded with chaos. The human stood tall now, no longer hiding. His blade shone in the firelight, his stance unshaken. He pushed the woman gently behind him, shielding her with his body. The raiders charged, their anger fierce, but his fury was greater. He struck like a storm, each move precise and brutal. Blades clashed, sparks flew, cries of pain filled the night. The woman clutched her broken chains, watching with wide eyes as he fought. He was only one man, but he fought like many. Each strike was faster than her eyes could follow. Each cry from the raiders echoed with fear. The firelight showed their faces breaking into terror. For the first time, the raiders understood. They were not the hunters. They were the prey. The woman's breath caught as she watched. She had thought hope was gone forever. Now hope stood before her, flesh and blood, moving like a storm. He was not only rescuing her. He was punishing those who had stolen her freedom. The battle raged, but in her heart, something deeper stirred. Her chains were gone, yet what struck her most was the human's eyes. They were not cold. They were fierce, yes, but also filled with something else. A fire that burned not only with rage but with purpose. One by one, the raiders fell into the dust. The night shook with their cries, then grew silent again. The human lowered his blade, his breath steady. His body was scarred, his armor cracked, yet he stood tall. He turned to her, his eyes softer now. He reached out his hand. Her lips trembled. She had no words, but she placed her hand in his. His grip was strong, steady, unshaken. For the first time in days, she was no longer bound. She was free. And she was not alone. The desert, once filled with cruel laughter, now lay silent. A silence born not of fear, but of justice. And for the first time, the night carried a new story. A story of a human who had come like a shadow, and struck like a storm. The fire still burned, but the raiders were gone. Their laughter was silent now, their bodies scattered across the sand. Smoke drifted into the desert night, rising like a ghost. The battle was over, yet the air still carried its weight. The woman stood frozen. Her wrists were raw, the broken chains heavy in her hands. For a moment she could not breathe. Freedom felt unreal, like a dream too fragile to touch. The human soldier wiped his blade clean and slid it back into its sheath. His chest rose and fell with calm strength, though his eyes still burned with fire. He turned to her slowly, not rushing, as if afraid to startle her. Their eyes met. She stepped back at first, uncertain. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen. His face carried scars, his armor was cracked, yet there was a steadiness in him that pulled her closer. He was not a raider. He was not a slaver. He was something else. He reached into his pack and pulled out a flask. Without a word, he held it out to her. She stared at it, then at him. Her lips trembled. Her body wanted to resist, but her thirst was too strong. She took the flask with shaking hands and drank. The water burned her throat, yet it was the sweetest thing she had ever tasted. Tears welled in her eyes. She lowered the flask, whispering a soft thank you. Her voice was hoarse, but it carried truth. The soldier nodded once, his expression unreadable. Yet his eyes softened. He crouched beside her and inspected the iron cuffs still around her ankles. With one swift strike of his blade, the metal broke. She gasped as the weight fell away. For the first time in days, she felt her body lighten. Her legs were weak, trembling, yet they were hers again. She touched her skin where the chains had been, as if to remind herself it was real. He extended his hand. She hesitated, her breath shallow. Trust was dangerous. Trust had cost her freedom before. But when she looked at him, she did not see cruelty. She saw fire held under control. She saw strength with purpose. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, warm. He pulled her to her feet with ease, as if her weight meant nothing. She swayed, her body fragile from exhaustion. He caught her before she could fall, steadying her with his arm. For a brief moment, she leaned against him. She felt the solid strength of his body, the steady rhythm of his breath. She had thought all kindness in the universe had abandoned her. Yet here, in the arms of a stranger, she felt safe. He stepped back, giving her space. He spoke at last, his voice low and steady. "You can walk?" She nodded weakly. Her legs shook, but she forced them to hold. He watched her closely, ready to catch her again if needed. The desert wind grew colder. The fire cracked behind them, the flames shrinking. The bodies of the raiders lay still, a reminder of what had just ended. She turned her eyes away, not wanting to look. He noticed, and without a word, guided her gaze back to the horizon. There, the night stretched wide and endless, filled with stars. For the first time since her capture, those stars no longer felt distant. They shone brighter, as if welcoming her back. She whispered softly, her voice shaking. "You came." He did not answer at first. His eyes scanned the desert, sharp and alert, as if danger could return at any moment. Then he looked back at her and spoke. "I was already here." The words settled deep inside her heart. He had watched. He had waited. He had chosen to fight for her. She felt tears on her cheeks before she realized she was crying. He reached out and gently brushed the edge of her sleeve, careful not to touch her skin without permission. His gesture was small, but it spoke more than words. It told her she was safe now. She wiped her tears quickly, embarrassed. Yet he did not look away. He did not judge. He only stood there, strong and quiet, as if her tears were not weakness but proof of her survival. She whispered again, her voice barely audible. "Why?" His eyes held hers. For a moment, silence stretched between them. The desert wind carried the question into the night. Finally, he answered. "Because no one else did." Her heart trembled. The words were simple, but they carried weight. He had fought not for reward, not for glory, but because it was right. That truth was more powerful than any blade. The fire behind them turned to embers. The night grew darker. He handed her the flask again, then adjusted his weapon. His eyes returned to the horizon, scanning. He was already thinking ahead. Escape. Survival. Protection. But she looked only at him. She saw more than a soldier. She saw the one who had broken her chains, the one who had stood between her and death. She saw the man who had rescued her not just from captivity, but from despair. Her voice broke softly, filled with something new. Not fear. Not pain. But trust. "I will follow." He nodded once, nothing more. Yet his eyes carried the promise she needed. The desert stretched before them, wide and dangerous. The raiders were gone, but the journey was not over. Still, for the first time in many days, she stepped forward without chains. And beside her walked the silent shadow who had become her rescuer. The desert night stretched wide and endless. The fire of the raiders' camp was dying, leaving only smoke and ash. The woman stood close to the human, her wrists raw but free, her heart still racing. Freedom was fragile. She feared it could be taken again. The soldier's eyes scanned the horizon. He listened to the wind, to the shifting sand, to every faint sound in the distance. His instincts told him the battle was not over. He tightened the straps on his armor and adjusted his weapon. His face was calm, but his body was ready. He turned to her. "We move." She nodded, though her legs trembled. He took the lead, guiding her away from the ruined camp. They walked fast through the sand, their shadows stretching under the pale light of the moon. She stumbled once, but his hand caught hers, steadying her before she could fall. His grip was strong yet gentle. For the first time since her capture, she felt more than hope. She felt alive. But the desert was not silent for long. Behind them came the sound of voices. Shouts carried through the night. The raiders had not all fallen. Some had survived. They had found their dead, and now their fury filled the air. The woman's chest tightened. Fear clawed at her throat. She turned to the soldier, her voice shaking. "They are coming." He did not slow. His eyes stayed on the path ahead. "Then they will follow. But they will not take you again." The words were calm, yet they struck her heart like fire. She followed him, her chains gone but her steps still heavy from exhaustion. He moved with purpose, fast and unshaken, his shadow cutting across the sand. The shouts grew louder. The raiders had mounted beasts, their snarls echoing through the desert. The ground shook with the pounding of hooves. Torches lit the darkness, flames burning against the night. The woman's breath came fast. She looked to the soldier, searching his face for fear. There was none. Only resolve. His eyes burned with the same fire she had seen when he broke her chains. At the edge of a rocky rise he stopped. He pulled her behind a wall of stone. She pressed her back against it, her chest rising and falling with panic. He knelt, scanning the horizon. His voice was low, steady. "They will chase us until the end. But here we fight." She wanted to protest. He was only one man. They were many. Yet when she looked at him, her words died. He was unshaken, as if he carried the strength of more than himself. The raiders' beasts stormed into view, their torches casting wild light across the sand. Their cries filled the night, sharp and angry. The woman gripped her wrists where the chains had been, trembling. The human rose to his full height. He drew his weapon. His shadow stretched tall across the stone. His voice was quiet but filled with thunder. "Stay behind me." The raiders charged. The ground quaked beneath their beasts. The flames drew closer. The woman held her breath. Then he moved. The soldier struck like lightning. His blade cut through the first rider, the torch falling into the sand. Sparks flew. The beast screamed and reared, throwing its master. The soldier did not stop. He moved from one to another, fast and sharp, his strikes clean and merciless. The woman could not look away. He was only one, yet he fought like many. Each swing of his weapon broke the charge. Each cry of the raiders filled the night with fear. They had hunted her for days, but now they were hunted. A rider broke past the soldier, racing toward her. She froze, her heart pounding. But before the blade reached her, the soldier's hand caught it. With a twist, he tore it free and struck the rider down. He stepped between her and the danger, his body a shield of flesh and steel. Her breath caught. She had never seen such fury, nor such strength. Yet what struck her most was not the violence of his strikes, but the way his eyes never left her. Every move was to protect her. Every risk was for her. The battle raged, but soon the raiders' charge faltered. Their beasts panicked, their torches fell. One by one, they fled into the dark, leaving their dead behind. The desert grew silent again. The soldier lowered his blade, his breath steady though his body carried the marks of the fight. He turned to her. His eyes softened, though his stance remained strong. "It is over." Her knees gave way, and she fell to the sand. Tears filled her eyes, not only from fear but from relief. He stepped closer, kneeling beside her. His hand brushed her shoulder, light but steady. She looked at him, her voice breaking. "You fought for me." His answer was simple. "I promised." Her heart trembled. She touched his hand, her fingers weak but certain. In that touch was gratitude, trust, and something deeper that words could not hold. The desert stretched wide before them. Danger still lurked, but the night no longer felt empty. She was not alone. Beside her walked the human, the storm in the shadows, the one who had chosen to fight when no one else would. The desert was silent again. The sand carried the ashes of battle, the bodies of raiders scattered across the ground. The fire of their torches had died, leaving only the stars to shine above. The woman sat on the cool sand, her chest rising and falling as she tried to catch her breath. She was alive. Free. The human soldier stood beside her, his blade still in his hand, though the battle was over. His armor was scarred, his face shadowed by moonlight, but his eyes never wavered. They stayed fixed on the horizon, watching, waiting. For a long time, neither spoke. Only the wind moved, brushing against their skin, carrying the smell of smoke and dust. Finally, the woman lifted her head. Her voice trembled, but it carried strength. "They will not stop. More will come." The soldier lowered his weapon, sliding it back into its sheath. He turned to her, his expression calm, steady. Then I will stop them. Her lips parted in disbelief. One man against many. One human standing against the cruelty of an army. Yet when she looked into his eyes, she saw no hesitation. She saw only truth. Her heart tightened. She reached for her wrists, touching the wounds left by the chains. They were still raw, but they no longer defined her. She looked at him, her voice breaking with emotion. You gave me back my freedom. His gaze softened, though his voice stayed firm. No. You carried your strength all along. I only broke the iron. Her breath caught. His words wrapped around her heart, filling it with warmth and fire. She had been beaten, dragged, humiliated. Yet he had seen more in her than she had seen in herself. Slowly, she rose to her feet. Her legs trembled, but she stood tall. He stepped closer, steadying her with his hand. The touch was brief, but it carried power. It told her she was not alone anymore. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to smile. It was small, fragile, but real. He looked at her with quiet intensity, as if memorizing the moment. The stars above burned brighter, their light spreading across the desert. She tilted her head back, her eyes glistening. Once those stars had felt cold, like distant witnesses to her suffering. Now they felt alive, as if they celebrated her survival. She lowered her gaze to him. Her voice was soft, filled with something she had not dared to feel. Why risk your life for me? You did not know me. His answer came without pause. Because humanity does not walk away. We fight for those who cannot fight for themselves. That is who we are. Her chest ached with emotion. She stepped closer, her hand trembling as it reached for his. He did not pull away. His fingers closed gently around hers, scarred but steady. The bond was silent, yet it spoke louder than words. In that moment, she understood. He was not just a rescuer. He was proof that hope could return when all seemed lost. He was proof that humanity carried something unbreakable. The desert wind swept around them, carrying the memory of chains, of laughter, of pain. But the night no longer belonged to fear. It belonged to them. She whispered, her voice breaking. Then let me walk with you. If danger comes, I will not hide. His eyes locked with hers. He studied her face, her resolve, her strength reborn. At last, he gave a single nod. Then we walked together. They turned toward the horizon. The desert stretched endless before them, dangerous and wild, yet filled with possibility. Their shadows blended on the sand, no longer prisoner and savior, but something more. She glanced at him one last time, her heart racing. She knew the journey ahead would not be easy. She knew the raiders would return, and more battles would come. But she also knew this truth: she would never face them alone. The soldier walked with quiet strength, his steps firm, his presence steady. She walked beside him, her spirit unchained, her fire alive again. And as the stars burned brighter above, the desert carried a new story. A story of how one human answered the cry of the broken, how one man's fury became hope, and how the bond between two strangers turned into something unshakable. When all hope is lost, when the chains of cruelty seem endless, pray that a human hears your cry. Because if a human comes, the chains will break.